I'm here to provide crucial feedback in an audio-visual format, because apparently no one at Funcom can read. Like, you really had us worried there. I thought they were lying about doing things based on feedback, but it just turns out they can't read any of it. And hopefully, this might also combat the voices in their heads that provide obscure feedback, making them do stupid things. I've played Dune for about 900 hours, pretty much just in the deep desert. Dune has come out with such a unique blend of vehicular and ground combat that also mixes ranged and melee combat, and it has proved to be capable of providing some really epic multiplayer gaming. Before this was out, I was pretty unsure how they would balance such a mix of different types of combat, but honestly I was pleasantly surprised. There are absolutely some issues, but something like this was never really done before, and I think they made a great start of it. The mix of ranged, melee, vehicular, all wrapped up in the really exotic IP of Dune, made for some amazing multiplayer experiences that kept people like myself coming back for more. However, to my great dismay, and to everyone else focused on the deep desert, the developers have ceaselessly neutered and maimed the PvP parts of Dune for no good benefit other than just to piss people off. Balance in PvP was always wonky at best, but up until now, for the last 5 months, all they have done in regards to balancing was removing and maiming what was already there. Funcom have been on a crusade to destroy Dune as much as possible in the name of Joel's ridiculous philosophy of you should always be able to escape unscathed no matter what. Not only does this kind of philosophy make for terrible gaming experience, but it's also completely backward, considering that PvP in Dune is near zero loss. The only thing you had to worry about was someone going, haha, I killed you, in global chat. It's my belief that Dune had the bones for one of the greatest mixed combat style multiplayer PvP experiences ever, and they utterly dismembered the game in favour of stupidity. Dune didn't even benefit a single thing from Funcom's rampage. The only thing they managed to consistently achieve was to piss people off with their ass-backward game design. Vehicular combat was the first to go to the graveyard. I won't go into much detail about this, but to sum it up, it went from constant epic air battles to why do you have rockets on your Thopter? Funcom the Destroyers hit vehicle combat so hard to facilitate Joel's brain-dead philosophy, that puts it nicely. They didn't even bother to address glaring balance issues such as assault Thopters being completely useless and VBTs being abused. In Dune, the name of the game is cheese. There is so much dumb crap in this game now that if you aren't cheesing the game with stupid mechanics, then you aren't playing Dune properly. The developers simply do not care how bad the game is, as long as you are able to press a button and leave a conflict. It is utterly insane how much Funcom have sacrificed for what is at best a lofty ideal. The fact that in the last 5 months, any and all of Funcom's effort into working on the PvP side of things have only been to degrade the experience. They literally could have left it completely untouched since launch, and it would be in a far superior state than it is today. For me, the tipping point was the nerf to Cripple Strike. What seemed like a small change had an enormous impact on the game. As a hardcore Dune enjoyer playing it up till recently, being in a state of hope, waiting on Funcom to deliver something great for PvP, aka their endgame rework in January. Unsure of what to expect, something new maybe, but even if they had simply reverted all their negative changes to the endgame, it would have been huge for Dune. News of a patch that fixed the repair glitch brought great hope to me, that finally PvP will no longer be zero loss, it will have stakes that ultimately led to meaningful gameplay, even if the servers were still dead. Competitively, PvP will finally be able to mean something in the most basic form of loss. What I never in 1,000,000 years could have anticipated was that this update also brought the end of melee combat in a Dune game, with a change that was never even mentioned or even in the PTC. This was the first time a major PvP change happened without being on the PTC. To put it bluntly, if the devs don't think this change has ended melee in Dune, then the hard truth is, they have no idea how the game works or how players play. To reiterate, there were 3 prominent forms of combat in Dune: vehicular, melee, and ranged. Vehicular combat was completely destroyed by a string of slow-release nerfs, and changes that made Thopter combat more and more tedious to the point of extinction. Their brutality toward this form of combat rattled everyone, who had trust in Funcom to deliver on meaningful and fun, varied gameplay. It kinda made sense, however, that Funcom so aggressively targeted vehicle combat due to the slew of complaints by people who, quite frankly, mean nothing in the grand scheme of a competitive deep desert. Because it received so much noob hate, you could understand why Funcom destroyed it first. However, the Cripple Strike nerf that destroyed Melee came at a complete and utter surprise, and to anyone who understood how the game worked, or dedicated much time in the DD, would agree this random and uncalled for change to Melee was nothing short of a bizarre knee-jerk reaction to nobody even knows yet what this reaction is to. In the world of ground combat, there were balance issues, 100%. However, never once has there ever been an overwhelming majority of melee players that dominate the battlefield, because in this game melee was challenging and difficult in the face of ranged, which offered much easier paths to killing opponents. It wasn't even. Melee was in the minority because of how technically disadvantageous it was, compared to some of the options that ranged play offered. Regardless, melee still existed, still often used by enthusiasts like myself who just enjoyed melee combat, or people who roleplayed, doing as hard as they could, as melee was the only fitting form of combat for something Dune related. The problem with melee was that to obtain a kill you needed to be physically attacking an opponent in front of you. The easiest way to escape a melee player was to simply turn around and go the other way. This kind of issue doesn't exist with ranged play because you can shoot at an enemy wherever they are, whereas melee depended entirely on positioning. To avoid getting killed by melee, all you needed to do was dash and run away. That simple. Because of this massive limitation to PvP, or melee, ranged was the most surefire way to be effective on the battlefield. However, melee players had only one useful skill to aid in combat, and that was Cripple Strike. The fact that there is only one viable ability for melee to be viable in Dune is an issue on its own, and could offer Funcom opportunities for some creative problem solving, which Funcom has demonstrated they have no ability. What Cripple Strike did was temporarily lasso a player, keeping them near you, so you could engage in melee combat, because that was the only way melee combat ever happened. You can't melee if you aren't in arm's reach of anyone. At almost any point of a melee fight, even at the last few points of stamina, you could literally dash backwards, hold space to get into the air, and the fight would have ended. I can't stress this enough. To get away from melee was that easy. Cripple Strike was the only ability that made melee viable by keeping your opponent from running away. That's it. That's all Cripple Strike is, anti-runaway ability, because you can literally walk out of any melee fight, which is far less possible with ranged play. Considering ranged was always the stronger of the two because it had an infinitely higher projection of force than melee, it was nothing short of insanely bizarre that Funcom decided that melee needed to be a thing of the past. No one even asked for it. In fact, people were already complaining, why is ranged king in a Dune game? The cripple nerf was incredibly frustrating, and I had to reach out to Iggy in Discord to let him know you need to make sure the devs understand how bad of a change this is, and to my surprise, Iggy parroted some devotional about the synergy of melee and ranged in combat, which made zero sense, and also seemed to have stirred up some other negative reactions. Yep, you're reading this right. In a game with such a varied combat system with two major styles of combat, there's no such thing as finding a style that you like or sweat to exploit. If you aren't doing what the devs want you to, then they'll make drastic changes whether you like it or not. Going further, the stupidity continues. If one playstyle is over or underutilized, it will get balanced. Sure, this was good wordplay from Iggy, because he never states anything would be balanced in an orderly fashion or with any common sense. Melee was an underutilized playstyle, and it was nerfed to the point that it is no longer viable in combat. That wasn't a balance, this was a straight up execution of the lesser combat style, which just so happens to be the only one resembling the style of Dune anyway. All of the feedback from this random Cripple Strike nerf nobody asked for was entirely negative. Allow me to help you, Funcom. I will not only provide feedback, but I'll digest it first and then spit it into your mouths just like a mother bird, since you're incapable of understanding why so many people would be pissed off that Funcom have made the already struggling melee unviable in a Dune game. 3 weeks have passed since they executed melee, and I rushed to see every ping Funcom put out about an update, to see if they've decided to revert the Cripple Strike nerf, because it received so much intense negative feedback. And finally, after all this radio silence, they decide to double down on the decision to nerf Cripple Strike in the most brain-dead way imaginable. What boggles my mind completely is that the devs did not know that nerfing Cripple Strike would entirely remove Melee as one of the primary playstyles, even though it was already very difficult to pull off. And now they refuse to listen to the onslaught of negative feedback, still having no clue that they straight up murdered melee combat. Let me illustrate what experiencing Dune's development journey is like. Funcom is a mentally disabled and deaf toddler playing with a knife, and I'm behind an unbreakable glass wall, beating on the glass, yelling desperately, hoping the dumb toddler stops trying to kill itself. You see this line here? This is straight out of Satan's arsehole, and I know exactly who was responsible for it. The insane part is that even before the Cripple Strike nerf, you could still easily avoid it with quite literally the push of a button with Suspensor Blast. Even before the Cripple Strike nerf, it was easy to escape someone who tried to melee. Watching Funcom destroy Dune bit by bit for the sake of the most insane philosophy has been the most depressing gaming experience ever. I love playing Dune so much, and I hate Funcom so much for utterly destroying the game. Joel's stupid vision was still very much valid before the Cripple Strike nerf. What they did was not only an overcorrection, but a complete massacre of any viability of melee in combat. It's such an absolute piss take that not only is melee unviable now, but even if you decide to use melee with Cripple Strike, you put yourself at a significant disadvantage. I don't want to go into this too deeply because it's so depressing, but melee has been dumbed down so hard that you can win a fight easily by doing nothing but dashing and backpedaling, zero skill required. And that is of course if you don't decide to just turn around and leave. Iggy's braindead ideal of switching between melee and ranged was valid before, but now it's completely moot point because melee is completely useless now. Ranged is the only reliable way to fight. There's no point of mixing between the two because melee is completely useless. What's even wilder is they claim to make changes based on feedback. They received no feedback on Cripple Strike or melee being a problem. Out of nowhere, made melee obsolete, received a huge amount of backlash on it, refused to revert the issue, and continued on with announcing a rapier rework. What this actually will be is a nerf, which is actually freaking hilarious because melee is already dead. Wish they would spend some time addressing real issues instead of listening to the voices in their heads. It's utterly disgusting the way Funcom is destroying Dune. They deserve all the abuse they're copping. I don't want to be crapping on Funcom. I would much prefer to sit here and say, Funcom is the best, these guys know what they're doing, Joel's brilliant, this guy can design freaking whatever. But I can't, because all Funcom have done is piss in my mouth, and they can go get screwed. To further help you guys, I've made a 3-step plan for your success. Stop, stop, and stop. Once you've mastered these 3 techniques, revert all changes to the Deep Desert and PvP and start from there. I want you, Joel, to have a look at these clips. See these group battles? See these air battles? Never again is this going to happen in Dune because you're all a pack of monkeys. To further address the issue of Funcom being unable to digest feedback, I've translated the video into a language they can understand.